right now, actually, is when we're going to bring the Øysteins up. So Øystein Eriksen Søreide and Øystein Olsen, who I've met in the past 2 of these conferences. We're going to talk about Trumponomics and Norway. So this is a very dangerous topic, I want to add. And so I just want to tell you, this is a very dangerous topic. And I have a podcast, and on my podcast, I've had Democrats, I've had Republicans, I've had Trump people, I've had non-Trump people, I've had the whole political spectrum. And no matter who I have on, the other side accuses me of, like if I have someone on who's, let's say, a Democrat in the US, on the left in the US, everyone will accuse me of being a communist. And if I have on someone who's for Trump, everyone will accuse me of being a Nazi. So, a Jewish Nazi, no less. So, and you can't avoid that. So I'm sure today, depending on what questions I ask, some people will say, oh, he's a Nazi or he's a communist or whatever. That's fine. I'm going to be as skeptical as possible, and so I may come across one way or the other, but I really am just curious, and knowing what I know about the Norwegian economy and our 2 esteemed guests, I hope it will be challenging for them and for me as well. So, just as an introduction, Øystein Olsen was governor of the Norwegian bank, central bank, and ran that for many years, ran it successfully. I am so impressed with Norway's economy, by the way. It's your fault. And, one of the lowest debt ratios in the world, $1.7 trillion sovereign wealth fund. I did not know this. You know this. Norway is the Norwegian fund is the single largest holder of stocks in the world. Did you know that? Of course you do that. He bought all the stocks. and Olsen Eriksen Søreide, this is the first time we're meeting, but managing director of Abelia. I've been a business leader for a long time, former Conservative Party politician. Previously, you were a director in Oslo's Bilde Grud, I don't know what that is, and vice mayor for health and social welfare in Oslo. You've done so many different things. You worked for UNICEF, SOS Children's Villages, CARE, which is a global humanitarian organization fighting poverty. Such a pleasure to have you on. And I really am, on purpose, don't know how you feel about Trumponomics and the US. I don't know how I feel about it. So perhaps you could tell me, starting off, what do you think Norway in general thinks about the US, particularly in the past 6 months?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Well, it's a big topic, topic, and I guess I feel it's kind of challenging also to discuss Trumponomics with an American.
all 300 million of us, or?
Norway is a small open economy. You touched upon our status. Relatively wealthy, or maybe one of the wealthiest in the world, and accordingly we are very exposed to what's happening internationally. So that explains, and things are happening now. The uncertainties grow, and things seem internationally, the trading system seems to be changing. I mean, by the way, if I go back to my interest of music, one of my, and many others, heroes is Bob Dylan. I recommend the recent movie, by the way.
Excellent movie.
And one of his best albums, early albums, Times There Are Changing. You know that album, and the lyrics of that song obviously refers to challenges of that time, not the present one. But look into his lyrics. They seem relevant even today. By the way, James, his hairstyle is more or less the same as yours now.
If I walk around in New York City, people often ask, "Are you Bob Dylan's son?" And I say yes. So,
but times are challenging, very challenging. The trading system seems to be changing dramatically, and if Trump comes through with his ambitions of introducing very high tariffs all around, and although it goes up and down, it's going to happen, I think. So there's a plan here that's going to hurt us all. Everybody's going to lose. There are no winners, only losers, as Dylan says, by the way. And small open economies and developing countries are going to be hit even worse.
Times are changing, and you are in a country where we love America. We love the US. Maybe now people are starting to say, we used to love America. So, to your question, I think these are changing times, and people's perception of the US is changing, and we don't like the way it's changing, to be honest. I mean, we liked to love America, and I think America has been the world's biggest superpower, you know, and a military power, but it also had tremendous soft powers, which I think are also changing in a way.
What do you mean by soft power?
So cultural power. You know, we admire American film heroes, sports heroes. I mean, all the influences, everything good, everything new, everything exciting came from America. Now we feel other influences are coming from America. Even freedom came from America, so to speak. And we are observing what's happening in academia, in other areas, and we feel uncomfortable about it. I think that's my sort of opening statement to your question. But another point, referring to the strength and opportunities of Norway and the Norwegian economy in this changing world. Yes, we are a rich country, but if we took the whole Norwegian sovereign wealth fund and wanted to buy one of the biggest tech companies in the US, say Nvidia or Apple, we would hardly get a majority of the shares, even with the entire wealth fund. So we have a lot of money, but it's not that much.
And so it's interesting. I want to focus on the economy a little bit, the nomics of Trumponomics, but what you say about freedoms is very interesting, and I don't know the answer. I think nobody really knows the answer, but how do you define freedoms? Let's say the U.S. is declining in freedoms or encouraging the decline of freedoms. What does that mean?
You want to go first?
Well, I'm an economist.
Well, is that an excuse?
No, absolutely not. But it's a very broad question you have. What you mean by freedom? I do think we know we have a good sense of what it means. It means to live in societies in the West, in the industrial world, like the one we have now. That's what we mean. And then we have experiences, if I go back in history, that there are forces developing over time that have opened the way for strong leaders that have ended up as dictators. Mostly in Europe, not so much in the US. It's a younger society.
Sure.
So I think that this is what we are afraid of, and I'm an optimist by nature. I think things are going to end up well, relatively well, after all. I hope, and I think so. But there are signals in many European countries, and I don't understand what the policy of Trump is, if you, even apart from economics, when I'm seeing what's happening in the US with institutions, with Trump threatening the independence of the central bank. And if that tendency continues, democracies are not going to disappear. Freedom is going to remain broadly, I think. But the direction worries me.
Yeah. And you could talk about freedom of speech, freedom of thought. I mean, the liberal democracies, and again, this is what we use to love the US for, being, you know, the beacon of light and hope and freedom. And we are, I'm perhaps exaggerating, but you're asking how do we perceive this now in Norway? And I think we are worried about some of these developments.
But it's interesting, the concept of freedom of speech, because on the one hand, freedom of speech broke wide open, you know, under, like, let's say Elon Musk bought Twitter, it's now called X, and let's say Elon Musk and Trump are like-minded, and Elon Musk really encouraged X that no speech should be censored at all, complete freedom of speech. And then what ends up happening on the downside is that it's not that hard now to find examples of extreme racism or anti-Semitism or anti-Asian on Twitter or X now because of this, you know, push towards freedom of speech. And I think there's no real answer, but where's the balance on that? And again, it's not really an economics question, it's more open-ended, but it's not like one side is against and one side's for freedom of speech. I think it's just where is that line? And
where's
it's a hard
that balance?
question.
And of course, even as you can lecture about that, I'm sure Adam Smith, the founder of capitalism, he said the market has limits and there needs to be boundaries to the market, and we need to counter the imperfections of the market and so on. And of course, with the things you see, if you have a monopolistic economy, or even, I mean, some of the tech giants may be going in that direction of monopolizing certain areas, of course, then you need to introduce that concept of freedom, of open up the markets and also giving the smaller players a room.
Well, I think it's relevant to mention Adam Smith, which is the sort of father of free market functioning. Wealth of Nations, his famous book. But we should all remember, and Trump and the administration in the US should be reminded now of his, that he combined his belief in market mechanisms in moral issues.
Yes.
I mean, he has another famous book, Moral Sentiments. That's the name of the book. Adam Smith was a philosopher, and he was just as engaged in that kind of issues as he was in economics.
Right, Adam Smith viewed a free market society as the most moral society.
Yeah.
And so that plays, on the one hand, Trump argues for deregulation in many industries, making the markets as free as possible, but on the other hand, we see him regulating, for instance, tariffs, this heavy government regulation. And so let me drive to that. So Norway, of course, is a very export-driven economy, from oil to seafood and onwards. And how does Norway either pivot or deal with, and what's your predictions for what could happen as the export world turns upside down because of tariffs, or will it turn upside down?
The employer side.
First of all, I think the key word that has been so heavily introduced now is uncertainty. And if there's one thing markets hate and businesses and business leaders hate, it's uncertainty. I mean, regardless almost of the tax level or the regulations, as long as they are more stable and predictable, that is something the market and the businesses like. So that's one part of the question. Another one is that for the Norwegian economy and Norwegian society, we have for long before Trump had a need to transition and to become less dependent on what we in Abelia call the sardine box economy, which consists of fish, oil, and aluminum or metals. We need to find more legs, other legs to stand on as well. And this is a need we have regardless of the current situation. So we need to focus more and invest more in research, in competence, human capital, technology. And this is a need we have as a society and as an economy. And we probably have to do it also more in a European context. We tend to focus on the dangers with tariffs and, okay, are we going to be able to sell our products to the US? We have to remember that less than 4% of our exports go to the US market, whereas 2/3, 66% or more or less, go to Europe.
I'd like to refer to an American famous economist, Larry Summers, who used to be Secretary of Treasury, but he's a finance minister in the US. He's still very, very active, and it's worth listening to He has podcast and the like, I think. He has characterized the announced tariff policy by the Trump administration in the following way, and I agree. A fascinating thing with the profession of economics and the subject is that there is no secure answer. There are different camps. We disagree in many things. But on this issue, Summers says, if there is going to be high tariffs and there will be countermeasures from Europe and China, and you have these things going on, 98% of all economists agree. It's going to hurt everybody, including US citizens. I mean, Trump should be reminded that tariffs is a tax on the citizens. It's a tax, high taxes on US inhabitants.
And why do you think he doesn't realize that? You know, let's go down that path.
He doesn't understand. That's my opinion.
So I spoke about a week ago to Wilbur Ross, who was Secretary of Commerce under Trump in the first administration. And so he had to impose, he was the guy who imposed for Trump the steel and aluminum tariffs in 2017 and 2018. And I asked him about the current situation, and he said he was surprised Trump did the across-the-board tariff on everything. But then he thought that, to your issue about uncertainty, which everybody agrees is a bad thing for the markets, he thought that the other tariffs, he wanted to create that uncertainty to open the doorway. He felt nobody would negotiate with him unless he created that uncertainty. And that maybe then there's opportunities not only for US, but the countries that now can sit down and negotiate with the US.
Yeah, and I think we see and we understand Trump as the master deal maker. He wants to put himself and the country in a position where he can make good deals, and maybe this is the part of his thinking. Yeah.
And how could that benefit Norway?
Well, I said, if it happens, everybody's going to lose. Norway is a small open economy, but still, we're always lucky. I think we have the oil. Our traditional exporting industries are going to be hit by tariffs, especially if that occurs also in Europe, which is our most important market, by countermeasures as a response for the US tariffs. But a high share of our exports is oil and gas, and that's probably it's not going to be. Tariffs are not going to be implemented on oil and gas exports. So in relative terms, we could be well off. But as I said, everybody's going to lose. But there's another scenario which I should like to mention, which I don't hope is going to occur. But there's now the Council of Economic Advisors, which is a main advising office for the president, is now led by an economist. He's a good economist, I'm sure, Stephen Miran. He's written a note called A User's Guide to Reforming the International Trading System, and he describes tariffs, but they also want to weaken the dollar. That's a sort of the root cause to all evil and to many of the problems. My opinion, at least, is that that's a very dangerous road, based on the fact that dollar is the world's reserve currency. We trust the dollar. It's underlying other currencies in many ways. So how should they, if they succeed to weaken the dollar in number terms, they risk to take this confidence to dollar away. And if that happens, it's going to result in a financial crisis, which might be worse than the one we experienced in 2008, 2009. So that's another very risky scenario, I think, by Trump policy.
So my question to you is, as a strong player, particularly in Europe for oil exports, why not denominate oil sales in the krone, for instance? Like, why not, or some basket of other currencies other than the dollar? You're the guy who does it.
It doesn't matter. Dollar is denoted in dollar. Oil exports or is denoted in dollars. When we have dollar revenues from oil and gas sale, it's in foreign currency, mostly dollars. So that's
But
already
you're
done.
suggesting that we improve sort of the standing of the Norwegian krona and selling in krona instead? Was that your...
Yeah, it's a strong currency, and you're the main exporter of oil in Europe.
It's not a really strong currency these days.
It's actually a relatively
we are
weak currency.
losing when we go to Denmark. We have no money
without
left.
that being a main problem. But that's a big discussion. No, Norway's kroner is a very small currency, so we could not sort of see kroner replacing dollar in the international currency market. No currency can presently. That's part of the problem I just hinted at. Maybe remember the Chinese in the longer run.
But you can't really. There's not enough transparency in the Chinese government to trust how much renminbi is in the supply. That could be a much weaker currency, but we just don't know.
Correct. I agree. So there is really no present good alternative to dollar, and that's part of the problem I mentioned.
I was just thinking that maybe we need to maybe try to find some hope and some solutions and some other sort of scenarios going forward. And I'm just thinking that we perhaps tend to focus a bit too much on export, in the sense that we are focusing on exporting, goods, whether it be oil and gas or products as such. I'm sure there are many tech people in the audience, and when it comes to the tech industry, is it really meaningful to talk about exports in the same way? I'm thinking that many of these companies have the ambition, and should perhaps have the ambition, of being sort of born global. And they don't have to move the software physically from one country to another. So maybe there is also another dynamic going on, and maybe we also should try and focus on how to build these kind of strong tech companies, even out of Norway, building on data, access to data, and some of the capabilities we have in our current industries. Look at Equinor, for instance, which going only 15 years back was the most valuable company in the Nordics, by far. Today, it's surpassed by especially Danish and Swedish biotech companies like Novo Nordisk. They are 4 or 5 times the value of Equinor. And look at Spotify, which didn't exist or had its first sort of a subscriber in 2008. It's a global tech platform company. It now has it has a double of the value of Equinor in market terms. So things are. We have to also look in other directions for going forward.
This could be very interesting, Øystein, because now there could be a discussion between the two of us. You're right in pointing out the market values between Spotify, say, and Equinor. But if you look at the profitability, is a completely different matter.
They just made their first
Spotify has, with one exception, last year actually, they never earned money.
But that's almost an American tradition, right? So Amazon never made money for the first 20 years.
That's true.
And now is one of the most profitable companies in the world. Apple was losing money hand over fist in the 90s, and now is the most profitable company in the world.
So they're probably on that trajectory.
That could happen with Spotify, but I suspect that the Swedish people would like to have the Equinor and oil rather than Klarna and Spotify.
They tried to get it many years ago.
I'm not an economist, of course, but the U.S. would love to be in the situation of Norway. U.S. has $37 trillion in debt. It's 120% of GDP. Norway's debt is something like 30% of GDP, and you have an enormous sovereign wealth fund. The U.S. doesn't have any sovereign wealth fund. So you see in the Middle Eastern countries how they diversified out of oil into technology, maybe good, maybe not so good. But I think, to your point of not always just thinking about, oil is our export, building a technology center here, I think you have probably more opportunity to do that than any other country in the world. And maybe Trumponomics, for better or for worse, as you're pointing out, sort of forces you in that direction. We'll see. But I've learned so much. I always learn from you, Øystein, and now I'm learning from the other Øystein. So thank you so much for coming here and talking to me about Trumponomics. I appreciate it.